Hi, I'm Chloe Salto, sports editor at The Age. In the lead up to the grand final, our reporters will bring you stories about some of the characters who've shaped Melbourne and the Western Bulldogs. Have a listen and enjoy.
Welcome to this Real Footy Podcast Grand Final Special. I'm Martin Flanagan. This is the first in a series of readings I'm going to do from A Wink in the Universe, my book about the 2016 Bulldogs Premiership. The book starts with a brief history of the club and profiles of Luke Beveridge and Bob Murphy. We then meet each of the 22 players in the grand final team. This is some of what I wrote about Tom Liberatore. In the words of the coach, a free spirit. Toby McLean calls him the biggest character. Jake Stringer loves him. He's different, he's himself, he's Libba. Jordan Roughhead says he's different and he gets off on being different. It wouldn't surprise me if he came in tomorrow and said he'd retired. He's a reader. The three writers he names to me are William Burroughs, Charles Bukowski and Hunter S. Thompson, all somewhat rebellious figures from 20th century American literature. He has some lines of the man he calls Hunter S. tattooed onto the inside of his left forearm. Quote, "When the going gets weird, the weird turn pro." As chance has it, while writing this book, I happened to meet Libba's Year 10 English teacher at St Kevin's. He told me how strongly young Tom engaged with Shakespeare's Othello. Jason Johannesson describes him as a strange, intelligent person who's fun to be around. He's a prankster. You need those people in a footy club. We spend a lot of time together. It has to be fun. A natural dissident, Tom Liberatore says footy's good for him because it keeps me out of the pub 50% of the time. At one point in our conversation, he talks about hating Geelong because they're arrogant. What about GWS, I ask him. Are they arrogant? Do you hate them too? Yes, he says, I hate them too. Then he pauses, smiles mischievously and says, do I believe anything I say? Maybe not. But out on the field, according to Mitch Wallace, who has played with Tom Liberatore since boyhood, quote, the competitive thing takes over and he becomes your teammate. Libba's teammates love him. Marcus Bontempelli calls him the guard dog. As soon as there's a scuffle, he's in. Bob Murphy says of Tom Liberatore's 2016 final series, he was our enforcer, all 182 centimetres of him. Tory Dixon sums up the paradox of Tom Liberatore this way. He turns up at the club some days in op shop clothes. He doesn't care what people think, but at the same time he's very loyal to people. He has had discipline issues with the club, what he calls his indiscretion in 2012 when he was found intoxicated in King Street with illegal drugs in his possession. During 2015, while in rehabilitation, the story broke in the media that he had missed a number of club functions without permission. When Tom Liberatore first appeared on the AFL scene, he reminded me of the young Bob Dylan. Pale face, frizzy hair, something hidden about him as a personality. His play was sharp and precise. There was an unusual intelligence behind it. But I didn't foresee the force he could become. More than once Bob Murphy told me Libba's a gun. He has the courage of the same limitless order as his father, Brownlow medalist Tony Liberatore. But Tom also has a freakishly creative edge to him. In addition to his skill at prizing apart packs and hacking the ball from the arms of whoever is holding it, he can then fling himself backwards, handballing over his head as he does, finding a teammate you can't credit that he's seen. I seek to track down the secret to this highly unconventional skill. Does he know the other player is there? Does he see him before he handballs? He replies enigmatically, I think so. Tom's mother Jane is an O'Donnell from Warrnambool. Irish, says Tom, with another of his wispish grins. Irish and Italian, a bad combination. A journalist once described Tom Liberatore as unconventional to the point of indefinable. If I were to hazard a guess as to this complex young man's identity, I would describe him as an Irish eccentric with Italian passion at his core. When did you fall in love with football, I ask him. When I was born, he replies. He mumbles like a character from a movie about the Chicago mob, so that the first half of his sentences have to be guessed at. He knew when he stepped inside the Western Bulldogs in 2010 that he was where he wanted to be. What he loves about football is the roar, the shared emotion. That, he says, is pure ecstasy. Libba says the three most important things in his life are family, mates and footy. He says his mates keep his feet on the ground, stop him becoming a wanker. He sees himself as performing the same service for his Bulldog teammates. Tom Liberatore told me he gets infuriated by the bloke on the plane who sits beside you and says and does nothing. Surely, thinks Libba, something must be stimulating your brain. On the football field, he seeks to find out what by invading the personal space of opponents. He might run his hand through your curls, as he did to West Coast champion Matt Prittis before the start of the first final in Perth, commenting on his hairstyle with disdain. Or he might grab your nipples. Telling me this, he says with mock seriousness, nothing indecent, of course. Tom Liberatore says, when I have my personality out there on the field, I do better. During the 2016 finals, he made, quote, a conscious decision to take it further. His hair, which has an Italian frizz, had, as I saw it, lent itself to a series of roles since he arrived at the club. The young Bob Dylan, who was succeeded by the plain but honest workman who won the 2014 Best and Fairest. By the time the 2016 finals came around, with his head ringed by baldness on the bottom half, a big rush of black hair on top and a thin moustache, he looked like an Italian anarchist from the 19th century. And football anarchist is the role he played, unforgettably. Having finished 7th, the Bulldogs' first final is in Perth against West Coast. No one has won a premiership from 7th. The Bulldogs have lost their last 7 games in Perth. 4 of those losses have been against West Coast by 70 points or more. The Dogs have never not once won a final interstate. No one gives them a chance. From the start, Libba is irrepressible. I'll read from the book. Libba kicks a goal in the first quarter off a single step over his shoulder from 40 out that signals class and confidence, not just his but the team's as well. Around this point of the match, a trainer hears Libba interviewing his opponent, Sharad Wellingham, about the state of the game. What's happening here? What do you think's going on? Objecting to a high tackle on teammate Lockie Hunter, he bumps Luke Shuey from behind as the two teams leave the field at half-time, thereby sparking a fracas. West Coast's Mark Lacroix rushes in and delivers what Libba calls a shit sledge about my old man. Libba had been discussing Lacroix's tan with him shortly before. The Dogs are like an army on the march, and Libba's the drummer boy. He performed similarly in the preliminary final against GWS. Earlier in that year, the Dogs had been cut apart by Heath Shaw, rampaging out of defence and delivering nearly 40 spear-like passes to teammates running into offensive positions further up the ground. Shaw organises the GWS defence, barking orders like an irascible infantry officer. Libba sends him off, interferes with his cranial mechanisms. The anarchist with the charcoal black curls is into Shaw early, circling a forefinger beside his head, thereby signalling to Heath Shaw and the football world in general that the GWS player is crazy. In his efforts to remonstrate, Shaw appears to prove Liberatore wholly correct, delivering orations that led me to write in The Age that he looked like a North Korean newsreader with Kim Jong-il in the studio judging him on his patriotic fervour. Meanwhile, Clay Smith has kicked 4 goals and Shaw's main opponent, Tory Dixon, has kicked a couple and will finish with 4. Libba went into the 2016 Grand Final with not 1 ankle injury but 2. The first he got when he nearly pulled Geelong apart single-handedly at Geelong in round 19. He owed Beveridge on that occasion because he'd been caught out drinking the previous week. The Dogs had only won once at Geelong ever before. Libba's effort that night was of heroic dimensions, but he ended up wrecking his ankle. He was lucky to get back for the finals, then injured his other ankle falling off Shane Biggs while celebrating their historic preliminary final win over GWS in Sydney. On the morning of the grand final, Shane Biggs, another of the team's notable characters and one who gets anxious about time, got Libba to the MCG 4 hours early. The place was locked up, cold, empty. They had to find somewhere to park. A bloke went past, spotted Shane Biggs, leant out the window and yelled, "Sean!" Libba thought that was funny. They were walking in the path when a woman approached him and asked him if he was Tom Liberatore. He said he was, but she was unsure, and rang her husband, who was in a queue at the MCG, to check that he was telling the truth. When they finally got to the ground, they found Libba had forgotten his boots. "I'll just wear someone else's," he said. An emergency call to Libba's housemates saw his boots delivered by an Uber. Grand finals are won and lost in the third quarter. Libba's third quarter was epic. He has as large an influence as any player on the ground. This is from my match report. With 6 minutes to go, Libba is seen wrestling with Rampy on the Dogs' full forward line. Rampy and Heath Grundy are taking the Dogs apart when the ball comes high into their forward line. Now Libba, having quelled Kennedy, is trying to fix that. Afterwards, Beveridge says he wondered at half-time, quote, whether the boys had anything left to give, unquote. Libba pursues the ball with his bent, shuffling run like an old man chasing chooks out of his front yard. In the aftermath of the grand final, the Bulldogs players head off around the world, again from the book. En route to Amsterdam, Libba goes to Vietnam with a mate, Tom Quinn. The YouTube footage that promptly returns to Australia shows Libba, beer in hand, watching a footy match in Vietnam while Tom Quinn gives him a haircut. In the YouTube clip, the top of his head has been shaved like a medieval monk, but he has a floppy veranda of frizzy hair at the front. I gather from Libba the idea was his mate's. He suggested a haircut. Libba said, give it a chop, do your worst. The team they were watching, Macau Lightning, was struggling for numbers and Libba was asked if he'd play. He describes the playing conditions as hot, humid and half-pissed. He had trouble breathing, but not only does he play, he ends up in the ruck. The footage also shows the Bulldogs midfield star bursting out of the centre square and goaling on the left. Back here in Melbourne, the footage confirms his newfound cult status as a football maverick. The club is not impressed. Libba has barely survived the season owing to the injury to his right ankle. He is only 1 year after a knee reconstruction. He is scheduled upon his return for an operation on his left ankle, which he injured celebrating the GWS preliminary final victory with Bigsy. Jason McCartney, a man you can only respect, delivers the message. Not a good idea, mate. One of my prized possessions is a copy of this book signed by the players and other significant people in the 2016 Premiership. In it, Libba wrote, this book is an honest and real picture. It meant a lot coming for him. Thanks for listening. Join us again soon for more stories from the book, which is available in print and ebook from Penguin Random House. We'll be doing more of them in the lead up to the grand final. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Join us again tomorrow and stay tuned to theage.com.au/AFL for all the best footy news and analysis.